So the goal of today's presentation, right, is you've seen this slide earlier in the day. You've seen it multiple times, right? So NSX, as you guys have known, is evolving and going out of like just vSphere networking and automation to other areas. We spoke about the edge in a lot of this in the earlier session. The goal of the session really is to kind of talk about NSX and cloud native applications, right? Yeah. So the idea really is to focus about new applications. So we've been kind of constantly talking to a lot of our customers over the last, I would say, more than 24 months. And we see a significant change in the way enterprise applications are being developed. We see a lot of our customers now adopting containers. It's going from the initial nascent stage to now kind of organizations embracing containers at mass scale. And we've been constantly working with them and trying to understand what have some of their pain points have been, and that's how we've shaped our products, okay? So the goal of today's presentation is really to kind of show you what we have kind of done with the NSX-T platform and containers, right? And our vision really is to take the NSX-T platform and make it a network and security virtualization platform that connects all endpoints, right? It could be virtual machines on vSphere. It could be virtual machines on KVM. It could be bare metal servers running some Linux servers. It could be containers as well. So the idea really for NSX is now to extend from the vSphere only environment to the entire application portfolio. So that's a big non-linear step, I would say, right? All applications. And as we do that, so another area really is to kind of extend and integrate into these modern application platforms, but provide a unique experience across multiple environments, whether it's vSphere and a public cloud like Amazon. For some customers, it could be bare metal containers and a cloud like Azure, right? So that's something we're trying to do. So I'll get started with some of the presentation. The goal, I would say, is to kind of keep it very interactive. So at any point of time, if you guys want to kind of share something, tell something that you see from your experience, please do so. So what we see is a fundamental transformation and a shift from the way how applications have been deployed over the last 20 years to what's happening now in the enterprise space, right? What we see, this is, we call this kind of as a change in enterprise application architecture. Sometimes this is all happening as part of digital efforts within an enterprise, right? If you kind of go into kind of an insurance bank, they're trying to kind of sell more services and build these digital experiences with their customers. So this is true for all customers that we have been seeing, whether it's financial customers, banking customers, auto customers. The idea really is to kind of provide, for all of these customers is to kind of, if you kind of take a step back, many industries are fundamentally being disrupted, right? If you kind of see auto, there's fundamental disruption. If you kind of see banking, there's a lot of disruption happening in the form of like peer-to-peer banking, right? So there's a new wave of companies that are trying to kind of go and do business differently. And as that trend happens in all these verticals, we see a lot of our existing large enterprise customers, right, that VMware has been serving for many years. They're also kind of trying to modernize their application portfolio. So that's a common trend that we see across the board, right? So we've been kind of looking at the container space all the way from early 2015, and the space has gone through a lot of change, right, in these last couple of years. But the common trend across all these enterprise customers, irrespective of their vertical and irrespective of their geo, is application modernization, okay? So that brings us to how applications have kind of been developed over the last 20 plus years, right? So if you kind of take a look at any organization, they have a mix of applications that they build themselves, right? Those are like what we call as the custom applications. And then there's a combination of applications that they procure from enterprises, right? You can think of that as commercial off-the-shelf software. So the common trend that we see in all of these environments is these applications, majority of them are virtualized. They're running on vSphere. And then every organization has some portfolio of applications that are non-virtualized, okay? So this is how pretty much any organization is really structured in terms of their application portfolio. And then you have like a network, and the network traditionally has been a network with some form of Cisco infrastructure, right? So the common trend that we see in all of these organizations as they try to kind of become more agile and nimble, right? And what I mean by that is we see this type of a goal. I'll just cite one example, right? So one of the largest car manufacturer based in Germany, right? We see this organization where they have a mobile app where you can actually turn your car on. You can control all of the settings in your car, right? It's called Mobile Me, right? I won't name the specific vendor, right? So, so the goal of that organization really is to have the ability to kind of, prototype a feature on Monday, Tuesday, kind of take it to testing and staging environment on Wednesday and Thursday, and actually GA the feature on Friday. So the goal is to be able to take a feature from concept to delivery, from a Jira story to a GA feature in 5 days. We see that type of agility and that goals as being common to many enterprises, right? So what helps to do that is really, in what we've kind of seen is modern application architecture. So across the board, we see that, majority of these applications, right, they're running in some form of a traditional application server. So for those of you who are familiar, majority of organizations have applications that are either Java-based applications or .NET-based applications. And there's these traditional application servers like WebSphere or WebLogic where these applications run, right? So as we've been talking to these customers, we see that these customers believe that, these traditional application servers and the way they're structured don't really enable them to kind of deliver applications at this speed, right? And some form of infrastructure like a platform as a service or containerized infrastructure where applications are kind of broken down into smaller applications, where a couple of developers are kind of delivering a small piece of the application or a small team is completely owning an application, is really enables them to kind of bring these type of features and functionality faster. So the common trend that we see across the board in a lot of our customers is really, for new applications, we kind of see them, for a lot of our customers go completely cloud native. But for business critical applications, we see a lot of our customers invest efforts in refactoring them or modernizing them to kind of host them on some form of an application platform. So the application platform space is where, where you see all of these different players like Kubernetes, Mesosphere, Docker, Cloud Foundry, all these players play, right? So irrespective of which platform an application chooses, and I'll kind of touch upon like a little more in terms of where we see traction, we see customers or developers kind of embracing some form of a CaaS or a PaaS platform, which they use to host applications, right? So it really enables them to develop applications faster. And this PaaS or CaaS platform also gives application developers abstraction to where this infrastructure is actually deployed, whether it's running on a private cloud or whether it's running in a public cloud. So what we're really trying to do with this, right? So as these applications get modernized and go to these environments, we see customers are now in a phase of their journey where they've kind of had success with the small couple of applications. Now they have really a mandate coming from top down to modernize a bigger and bigger portion of their estates. So this is something that we see across the board. I don't know what's your experiences. You guys are also engaging a lot with customers, whether you see similar trends. But this is something that we see in all of our customer bases, right? Irrespective of these verticals. Greg, do you kind of see something similar? Do you see it differently?
Yeah, I mean, containers are going to come down. Going to come down the poop chute eventually. In reality, but the enterprise is more wanting to have a 10-year sort of vision of what the barrel looks like.
Right.
It's a bit like giving your strategy an endoscope and then pretending that you know what's going on.
Right.
It's not. You don't really know where it's going to go. So
sure.
Well, you do technically.
I think we're going to end up with like the mainframe. There are still companies out there using that.
Right.
And I worked at a company fairly recently that still has a microcomputer from the 1960s.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And these things will exist. So we have to cover.
Yeah.
Even though the public cloud, I wasn't expecting to say anything. Even though the public cloud is going to, take up some part, the challenge here is how do we cover all of those?
Correct.
That's the challenge.
Correct.
Because we don't know where we're going to go.
Correct.
We've got to drag the mainframe along behind us. We've got to keep bare metal. We're going to have containers. We're going to have VMs. We're going to have containers on top of VMs. We're going to have VMs on top of containers, I'm sure. Somebody will come up with that crazy idea. And then we're going to have public clouds, hybrid, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know where we're going to go. I've sort of given up trying to guess.
I think that's a very pragmatic view. And if you kind of look at how the market has kind of was initially gung-ho and crazy about containers and what's its impact to like somebody like a company like VMware, which basically is in the virtualization with VMs business. This is a very practical view, right? Customers have now realized kind of the benefits of containerization, It's well understood. They've had some early success, some early challenges with containers. And now people are really looking to saying, how can I use this technology to deliver business benefits while understanding that this is a journey. It's a multi-year journey.
Yeah.
I need to maintain this estate and kind of deliver.
We've had some small-scale successes with containers or some high-profile successes, but that doesn't mean it necessarily, it's the old story, that's fine for Google or that's fine for Amazon, doesn't necessarily translate. So most of the time, I think at the moment, trying to pick your enterprise architecture 5 to 10 years out is a bit like picking up the horse's tail and trying to work out what it ate. It's really going to, you really need to go and talk to the horse's head.
What did you have during the break?
That's 3 in 5 minutes.
So there is some amount of success seen even in traditional enterprises, right? If you kind of look at various sectors, right? If you kind of look at financial, and if you look at like New York-based financial, which is where technology kind of is tried first and then goes to the rest of the country. There is some significant amount of success, right, where they've saying of run like 10,000 containers, 20,000 containers, right, across many companies, 4 or 5 of those critical companies, right. To the point where now there is a model where they've started to establish a template architecture, which they want to kind of normalize across multiple data centers, on-premise and cloud.
Yeah, I think what we've seen with containers is they do one app with containers, and then all of a sudden they think this is really fantastic, and then suddenly they have 10 apps with containers, and they realize actually it's not very fantastic.
Right.
Because you've got to keep them segmented, and then you've got to keep them secured and isolated, and you've got storage, and you've got backups, and you've like, and people have linearly extracted from a success from one must be a success for 10, and then they've forgotten that actually it curve tails off.
Correct. So,
and then just additionally, then you have maybe containers in different facilities, maybe some in the cloud, some in your private data center, and then the fun begins.
So all of these are things that VMware also sees and truly believes, and is how we are structuring our products to kind of help customers, right? We basically fundamentally believe that for a long time there will be applications running on VMs, they'll be running on private infrastructure, you will have obviously applications running on the public cloud. There are going to be bare metal instances like Hadoop and these other use cases where bare metal does best. And then you're going to have containers running sometimes in VMs, sometimes natively, and across the public cloud. So our vision with NSXT really is to address that space.
That's right.
Customers are in a journey where they have a big estate in the private cloud, in VMs. And it's a journey that is multidimensional, where there's an aspect of going to cloud, there's an aspect of going to bare metal, there's an aspect of kind of running some of these containers on these different frameworks, right? Like there's Kubernetes, there's Cloud Foundry. But our vision really is to make NSX a network abstraction that works with multiple application frameworks, right? We've kind of seen some consolidation, and Kubernetes is like the most popular abstraction out there today. Really works and provides like a common set of APIs across private and public cloud infrastructure. That's really what we're trying to do, right? And it's absolutely true, Greg. I mean, like it's like you're kind of really speaking for us. That's really what we champion. We champion the notion that this is a multi-year journey, and there is going to be heterogeneity, and you need to have some form of tool sets that works at scale. Not for one app, but it works for a portfolio of your part of your infrastructure.
Yeah, I think the key for NSX is that you're not unequivocally attached to the enterprise data center. So some other, some of your competitors, especially in the networking space, are totally committed to privately owned infrastructure and a nominal sort of vision of what happens in the cloud. They're sort of still trying to decide if they go in the cloud, will that impact their existing revenues? Whereas the arrival of NSXT, which has taken quite a long time, it's been talked about for a while, means that we can now be on Linux on bare metal, Linux in KVM, Linux in containers, so there's a container network interface there, and you can actually start to bring all of those together into a unified overlay system. It extends your NSXV, continues in the ESX hypervisor, but it extends you into wherever you're going to be. And then, interesting, the VelaCloud acquisition is another reflection of that. You're going to be wherever the network's going to go. We would expect NSXT and VelaCloud and NSXV to, some of those features would converge in some form. That'll play out in years to come. But you're going to be wherever the customer wants to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's really what we're trying to do. And we'll go into some of the details and like product demonstrations in terms of how we do it. But that's really where we're trying to go. But as we've kind of had this journey, right, in the last couple of years, we've kind of learned how container networking is being done as as things exist today, right? Without so containers today are running in a couple of platforms like Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, Docker, and irrespective of which platform you pick, they have a model where there's some form of networking that is kind of like an overlay network or a VM network that the container uses, and you typically use some form of NAT to get in and get out of that container, right? So it could be some platforms might call it like a Go router in the case of Cloud Foundry. Some platforms might call it like a ramp node. But irrespective of which mechanism, irrespective of which application platform you use, these containers today are not part of the data center networking fabric, right? They're not visible to the firewalls. They're not visible to your native load balancers. They're running without like a real native networking stack. They're using the networking stack of some VM or a container host, right? So we've seen that introduces a bunch of challenges, right? The fundamental challenge is really the fact that the container does not have an IP address that is visible to the rest of the data center network infrastructure. And because all the traffic from a container is really being natted by the container host IP, right? If the container is running in a VM, then the traffic leaving the VM will take the VM's IP. If the container is running in a bare metal server, it takes the bare metal server's IP. And NAT is something that ideally you would want to avoid, and you would want to keep it to the edge of the network, because with NAT comes the ability to kind of not have any form of security around the application. Because the whole idea is to have these general purpose shared clusters, which can have a variety of applications, right? Think of it as an application where there's one part of the app which is internet facing, one part of the app which is kind of more internal, writing to your backend databases. But when these type of apps run in a VM where they share the same VM's identity in the data center network, firewalls and load balancers and all of these devices can't really see the application identity, right? Because of NAT and masquerading. So yep.
You're probably going to go.
Yeah, sure.
Hold on. So
yep.
You guys are obviously solving for example, like the Docker networking, so MAC VLAN, IP VLAN, things like that. So you're going to solve that as well as like the IPAM integration and all that. Are you going to touch on all that?
I'm going to touch on all that.
Okay,
absolutely.
We're going to touch on all that. We're going to demo all that.
I've been waiting, so.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
To break the suspense, right? Because you already touched upon it. The goal of NSX.
I've been there. I just came from this issue, so I'm curious.
So the goal of NSX is to basically do all of the services required to bring a containerized application online. What that means is IPAM, connectivity, L2, L3 networking, security, and load balancing. We don't do DNS today because we think the application platforms do a good job of DNS by themselves today.
And
right?
you're also doing service mesh.
That's the next step for us. Okay. Yeah, right. So this is all based on an interface called CNI, Container Network Interface, and we'll go into the details.
Cool.
Right? Greg touched upon this. Most customers face success with one or two applications with containers. It basically gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of people get gung-ho. But when it comes to managing those applications and doing day-to-day operations and trying to scale them, is when they start facing the pain, right? Most of the application platforms, right, even like things like Cloud Foundry, right, all of these platforms do not come with a lot of visibility toolset or operational toolset, right, for containers. And that we've seen has had impacts in the ability for customers to scale their containerized deployments. So we really want to be a part of this journey with customers where they want to operationalize containers at scale. That's really what our goal is, right? We want to kind of be part of that journey. And to do that, and I'll touch upon multi-tenant networking, right? So customers have also the desire to kind of use these clusters and have multiple tenants where you have these internet-facing apps and internal apps, PCI apps and non-PCI apps, maybe from retail and investment banking. So people today, if you kind of walk into like a large enterprise, they're running like 20, 30 clusters or 23, 30 Cloud Foundry foundations. And each of this is a lot of infrastructure to manage, install, configure, upgrade, upkeep. So there is a container cluster sprawl that the industry is facing, and it's all boils down to the fact of multi-tenant infrastructure, right? So that's an area that we want to kind of play as well. But as I said, the goal of NSX is extremely simple: to build a network overlay solution that connects all endpoints, right? So the network, by definitions, has to connect all endpoints. In the past, it connected Windows servers, Linux servers, mainframe servers. Today, you have this evolution of containers, but the goal of the network should always be the same, right? So that's really what NSXT tries to do. NSXT tries to build an overlay network that works across on-premise and cloud infrastructure. On-premise, it's not limited to vSphere, bare metal, KVM, that connects all endpoints, right? So the Go vision is to kind of just connect all the types of endpoints and, kind of not to make container networking not any special at all, right? You should not really kind of think of container networking as anything special. It's just an endpoint that needs an identity. It could be an IPv4 address today. It could be an IPv6 address in the near future, but one network. That's really the approach, right? The second aspect is we see that customers who've kind of like this idea of security or micro-segmentation with NSX, and this has been out there for about at least for 4 years, really like to extend this concept to microservices. Because with microservices, what's happening is there are a couple of common trends. You see this large applications kind of being broken down to smaller and smaller applications. So the number of endpoints in your data centers kind of grow in a significant fashion. So customers don't face this pain today, but they kind of know that this is kind of something that they will face, right? There are a few customers who do, but it's very small, right? But across the board, as organizations kind of plan for large-scale kind of application modernization or migration of workloads from like an IBM WebSphere to kind of a modern application platform like Cloud Foundry, they realize that the number of endpoints that they have in the data center is going to increase in a significant fashion. That's the first thing. The second aspect is the whole thing with respect to application agility, which means that you're trying to kind of constantly bring new capabilities to this application. So this application is now trying to talk to like an external SaaS endpoint, right? Think of this Twilio or some messaging server external. So external SaaS endpoints, right? Whatever that be it. They're trying to talk to your internal application services in your VM estate. So the common trend that we kind of see is the fact that applications are changing in a much faster rate, or there's a desire to bring new features at a faster rate, which means that the infrastructure that backs it, right? So the networking and the security infrastructure that backs it should also be able to kind of be updated quite fast. So we do face a lot of our customers who had this small initial success, right, with app modernization. They are boggled down by network security. To be really honest, right? The reason for this is because at the end of the day, as they kind of bring these new applications and features, at the end of the day, they will have to connect to the enterprise system of record, which is like their mainframe servers or their Oracle servers. And these are many times at least 2 or 3 firewall zones away. So it boils down to kind of trying to build this app really fast and use all of this cloud native application tooling. But when it comes to network and security infrastructure, you're back to kind of failing a ticket and trying to find out like an IP and then figuring out with all of these NAT problems. So what we're trying to really do is, as enterprises embrace containerization and this cloud native application development and delivery mechanism, also build a cloud native networking platform that is super well integrated into the application platform. That's really what we're trying to do with NSXT. And you'll see all of this in today's demos where the integration with Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry and all of these things, right? Where as an application is deployed, the application gets like a security as part of the deployment process itself. This is something that is kind of sometimes not so much appreciated, but it's something that if you actually undergo some amount of containerization experience, you will start feeling the pain. So as you scale your portfolio of applications, right, customers start to realize that they don't have a lot of good tooling to monitor and troubleshoot this infrastructure, right? It's something that's not appreciated on day zero. Nobody says, I don't need the tooling. But as you scale your number of apps in these container environments, you realize that you don't really have the tooling. So that's an area that we try to focus, right? The whole vision is one network that connects all endpoints, and as part of that vision comes the ability to have one single tool set. So think of, so container networking should be, container should really be a first-class citizen of the data center, right? So of the data center network, which means that you should be able to kind of span traffic from a container or a microservice. You might want to rate limit it. You might want to apply some security to the microservice. So all the tooling that you would expect of an enterprise-grade network infrastructure should also be available for containerized applications, because if you want to manage this at scale. So that's an area where NSX as an enterprise SDN network tries to really focus and kind of bring value to these application platforms. So what we've been doing, how we've been doing this, right? We've been doing this integration on the NSXT platform. And the NSXT platform, what we've been doing is we've been integrating the NSX infrastructure with application platforms like Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry. We have this ability to integrate with Docker Swarm, but we haven't done that yet. And how we do this is by building this piece of software called the NSX Container Plugin. So the NSX Container Plugin, in the case of Kubernetes, it's another microservice that runs inside the Kubernetes cluster, right? Similar architecture for Cloud Foundry. But what it really does is it delivers application-driven networking. So the fundamental transition or shift from the past is, in the past, one would configure a network. Then they would configure like a VRF, you create a VLAN, somebody brings a VM, somebody else brings an operating system, and then the developer brings his application. So infrastructure went first, application came later. And for infrastructure, you might do ticketing or some level of automation. The fundamental transformation that we see in some of these larger customers is this whole notion to have application-driven infrastructure and infrastructure teams doing more policy management and monitoring rather than configuration, right? That's really what NSXT is trying to do. It's trying to basically say, hey, as you go deploy your application, we will do everything that is required to bring that application online, which is IPAM, right? Giving it IP addresses, creating subnets and advertising it to the network. We basically create ports, like instead of virtual physical Ethernet ports, here we creating virtual Ethernet ports. We're configuring load balancing for that application, security for the application. So all aspects of networking, security, and availability to bring an application online is being done as part of the application deployment process. It's super integrated into the application deployment lifecycle, right? And what we're doing is we're creating network infrastructure. So the whole idea is if you have some platform, right, like Kubernetes or OpenShift, they all have this notion of tenancy. Like for example, OpenShift has the notion of projects. Kubernetes has the notion of namespaces. Cloud Foundry has orgs. So the idea really is to have the ability to create networking on the fly, network automation, but also carry identity of the application platform to the network. So we want the network to be super aware of the application platform and applications. What that really means is if you went to an application platform like Pivotal Cloud Foundry and created an org, and you said this org is internet-facing apps, or this is like a PCI zone, right? We want the network that gets created on the fly to have that identity, right? We want this network, we want a network for that specific zone. It could have its own router, it could have its own network. As administrators, what we want to enable is the ability for you to control what IP addresses get configured for this zone of applications, right? What type, so things of that nature, rather than manually configuring it.
Things like that.
We use tags and
or
things
labels.
like that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
This application, when it comes up,
Absolutely.
around this.
Absolutely, right? So that's really what we're trying to do. And Eve will demonstrate some of these things a little more. So to give little context in terms of where we are in this journey, NSXT has had 3 major releases in 2017. NSXT 1.1 was done in February, where we bought this Kubernetes integration in tech preview. 2.0 was done in September, where we GA'd the integration of NSXT with Kubernetes and OpenShift, right? The reason for that is some of our customers were really embracing an application platform from Red Hat. But what our goal really was to kind of help and embrace customers in this containerization journey. So the goal really is to keep NSXT as an open platform that's open to all ecosystem partners, not just limited to VMware, and integrated with other platforms, right? Yeah.
Did you said that Docker Swarm, you don't currently support that?
We don't currently support that.
We had prototypes, so we can show that it works, but of course productizing it, GAing it is another journey.
Yeah. So was there a question there?
I mean, are you going to put a lot of time into it? Is I guess
where
I was
we see fewer and fewer reasons to do so. So we see a lot of our early adopters, customers who went there, also transitioning to Kubernetes. So we've architected the platform to integrate with multiple application frameworks, right? We have prototypes for that. But we see a lot of our customers who early adopters of Swarm also kind of migrating to Kubernetes. So
As they should.
Yeah, sure, right? So NSXT 2.0 was done in September, right? In December, we had another release called NSXT 2.1, where we integrated NSX with Cloud Foundry. And if you kind of think about all of these integrations, as I said, right, the goal is really to kind of, for NSX to provide all of application networking security and load balancing for these applications. So that's really what we've been doing.